As Israeli occupation forces intensify their operations in the West Bank, the humanitarian situation grows more dire, especially in Jenin. Throughout the last 2 weeks, around 40,000 Palestinians have been forced to leave their homes in Jenin, Tulkarm, and Nur Shams camps simultaneously. New laws in the Israeli Knesset could pave the way for the formal annexation of these occupied territories. How will these developments affect the daily lives of Palestinians, and what role will the international community play in addressing this escalating crisis? Welcome to In Depth. As Israel continues its offensive in Jenin, Palestinian civilians are bearing the brunt of violence. Thousands are fleeing their homes amid widespread destruction.
In the northern West Bank, the Israeli occupation military's operation entered its 45th day with a major push into Jenin, resulting in the deaths of 4 Palestinians, including a Hamas leader. The Israeli occupation army has deployed tanks and ground troops, marking a significant escalation. These operations, the so-called Iron Wall, have caused severe destruction in refugee camps. Homes have been demolished, and essential services, including electricity and water, have been cut off. Throughout the last 2 weeks, around 40,000 Palestinians have been forced to leave their homes in Jenin, Tulkarm, and Nur Shams camps, adding to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in the region. At the same time, the Knesset is trying to push through legislative proposals aimed at further consolidating Israeli control over the West Bank. One of the most significant proposals seeks to impose all laws enacted by the Knesset on the occupied West Bank, turning it into a de facto military order signed by the region's military commander. The Knesset also proposed a bill that sets measures to encourage Palestinians to emigrate from the occupied West Bank through financial support provided and determined by the Israeli Minister of Finance. The United Nations, through Secretary General Antonio Guterres, condemned the escalation of violence in the occupied West Bank and the calls of annexation, expressing concerns over other violations committed by Israeli settlers, including the displacement of Palestinians from 3 refugee camps and preventing their return. With the Israeli occupation forces escalating attacks on the West Bank and Israeli lawmakers pushing new laws that could formally annex parts of the area, the international community faces mounting pressure to respond to these actions.
Well, welcome back. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has met with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in Washington. According to New York Times, the visit marks a significant shift after years of being largely ignored by the Biden administration due to his controversial views, including opposition to a Gaza ceasefire and support for Jewish settlers in the West Bank. Under the Trump administration, Smotrich is welcomed, aligning with some U.S. officials' views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The meeting aimed to enhance economic cooperation between the U.S. and Israel. Smotrich's visit has raised concerns among some American Jewish organizations due to his divisive policies. And for more analysis, we are joined by Mr. Munir Nuseiba, an international law professor from the occupied Jerusalem, and we are also joined by Mr. Samir Abhara, a military expert from Jenin. Good morning, both gentlemen, and welcome to Q News. Let me start with Professor Nuseiba. And what do you think about the Israeli government's recent push for laws to annex parts of the West Bank, and how does this align with the international law?
Good morning to you and to all your viewers and your guests. International law prohibits the annexation of occupied territory. According to international law, occupation is only a temporary measure. It is only a military measure that is done for a certain period of time, and it is always bound to be ended at a certain point. This is why the International Court of Justice, in its most recent advisory opinion on the Israeli occupation in the occupied Palestinian territory, has found that the Israeli occupation is altogether illegal because it does not intend to be temporary, but rather it intends to be permanent. We saw how Israel has already annexed Jerusalem in 1948 and in 1967, both the western part and the eastern part, contrary to international law. And now they are openly saying that they want and they intend to, and they are already working on and implementing an annexation of at least parts of the West Bank. At the moment, the International Court of Justice also has found that Israel is committing apartheid and racial segregation in the occupied Palestinian territory, even before annexing an additional territory within the West Bank. This apartheid will be even worse when Israel annexes certain parts of the West Bank, while there is a significant Palestinian population still, of course, living in the West Bank and Jerusalem. Israel is working hard to displace Palestinians in its military assault on the West Bank over the past a few weeks. It has displaced more than 40,000 Palestinians, civilians, from their homes. What they are also doing is that they are demolishing the refugee camps, and if there are houses left without demolition, they will burn them. This is very similar to what the Israeli government did in the Gaza Strip. Ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip, ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, and the idea is they want Palestine without Palestinians because they want to annex it and make it, part of a Jewish space, and exclusively Jewish space. That's ethnic cleansing.
Right. Mr. Abhara, the Israeli military has recently expanded its offensives in the West Bank in general and on Jenin in particular. How does this escalation reflect Israel's overall strategy in the West Bank?
Good morning to you and to your kind guest. The Israeli army, under its declaration, the war against Gaza and the Palestinian people, such declarations coincide with the invasions of Israel as a strategic goal of the far-right wing, according to the Smotrich statement, citing the occupation of the West Bank and supported by America. The issue as a whole, the Israeli objectives against the West Bank and Gaza under the outlines of displacement and go in line with Trump's plan of displacement by the Palestinians. The Israeli army has incurred the West Bank and dominated the north, targeting the refugees camps under the political pretext that they wish to erase the refugees camps from the Palestinian memories and its presence on the UN umbrella as well as the international community. Raising the Palestinian identity of Nakba in 1948 in order for the people to forget such an identity. This also goes in line with the attack against the UNRWA that it is a great symbol of 1948 and the Nakba time. And that followed the full blockade of the Palestine. Even Israel changed the features of the Western Bank refugees camps, and then none of them is present. Infrastructure was demolished, and as Israel intends to change the features of this area through building a great building instead of the refugees, such as Tulkarm and Jenin, in order to cancel or ignoring the call upon the Palestinian return as it happened in 1948. So Israel would contribute in creating another Nakba by displacing the people of the refugees camps and force them to leave their houses.
Professor Nasiba, the United Nations has condemned Israel's actions in the West Bank, but have there been any kind of steps taken by the international community or this world body to halt further escalation in the West Bank or in other Palestinian areas?
Well, since September and even earlier in July, the International Court of Justice has already declared that the Israeli occupation in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, is counter to international law. Then the General Assembly have met and have issued a resolution in September urging Israel to end its occupation by the end of the year, within 12 months. They also decided to investigate, starting a measure similar to the measure that was used against apartheid South Africa before the fall of the apartheid regime there, where this measure would be, is something like an apartheid committee that would call for sanctions, call for a follow-up of the, of these violations. The United Nations, of course, within the Security Council, is paralyzed because the United States, at the end of the day, is a permanent member with a veto power, and therefore the United States is unable, it will continue to oppose any decisions of sanctions against Israel. And this leaves this responsibility.
In fact, there were reports that the U.S. has sanctioned some of the judges of the ICC, particularly the head of the ICC. How do you think that reflected on their ability to give their verdicts or their ability to be just towards the cause?
Yes. So yes, the United States, especially in the Trump administration, decided to sanction the International Criminal Court. This, of course, is a very weird concept. A state sanctioning a court is not something that the international community has experienced before, except with the first Trump administration. Now, at the end of the day, this only means that the Trump administration simply opposes international law. They don't want to allow the international justice system to function. We've also seen Donald Trump also calling for the displacement of the Palestinian people from the Gaza Strip and to make it a colony for Israelis and Americans, and I don't know who else he's thinking of. So at the end of the day, this administration is totally opposing international law. And at the end of the day, we also saw that there were a number of countries that decided to come together to oppose this, to support international law, to support the court, because at the end of the day, this court was built as part of an international system that is seeking some level of justice, seeking accountability.
We'll get back to the Gaza issue in a while, but let me here go to Mr. Abhara. And Mr. Abhara, how might Smotrich's visit to Washington influence U.S. policy on Israeli settlements and annexation, particularly as we're speaking here about the West Bank?
Yes, Smotrich is the mastermind of the incursion of the Western Bank and even the elimination of the Palestinian people and displacing them either in the West Bank and the Gaza. This matter goes in line with Netanyahu's plan, and Smotrich has already declared that they will withdraw from the cabinet and would lead to the collapse of its coalition. And the United States, it seems like there is some sort of a deal is planned by Smotrich to give the green light to Israel to the annexation of the West Bank in return to gaining the approval of Smotrich of the ceasefire. But the latest development that we witnessed in the Arab summit that included the Palestinian cause internationally again, along with the Saudi conditions with regard to the normalizations with Israel by establishing the Palestinian state. Such a matter forced Netanyahu to execute his intentions that would threaten his political future by the resumption of war against Gaza. This also goes in line with the Israeli hostilities in the West Bank. That means a state of war in both areas, in the West Bank and Gaza. It is some statements sometimes don't try to reflect the matters, but only to gain political gains. So Smotrich visit to the United States that may give the United States some facts, or rather gifts in the account of the Palestinian people in the West Bank, but practically the West Bank that Netanyahu think it is an Israeli land, that against some acts due to the international law. First, 1993, Israel signed to the agreement of the Palestinian right of the establishing its independent state on the lines of 1967, which is an implicit acknowledgement that this land is the right of the Palestinians. And some Israelis also admitted that this is a Palestinian land occupied by the Israelis, even inside the far right wing in the leftist parties. So this Smotrich's vision will collapse by the annexing the West Bank into Israel and expel the Palestinian people from their land.
Right. Professor Nasiba, how does Smotrich advocacy for the West Bank annexation align with the international law? Let me here also ask you, this is the first visit of Smotrich to the United States right after Trump assumed office, when he was not able to go all the way during Biden's administration. What does this signify, and how his advocacy for the annexation of the West Bank aligns with the West Bank, right, with the international laws?
Yes, the Biden administration was quite complicit in the genocide that Israel has been committing in the Gaza Strip. However, it wasn't as right-wing as this current administration, which not only is complicit with the genocide, but it also really supports the very right-wing Zionist idea of annexing more land, of displacing the Palestinians. There is some level of, in some cases, equality of thought, or the same type of thought between the Israeli radical Zionist right wing and this government. This government supports extreme leaders like Smotrich and Ben Gvir. They align, unfortunately, with their objectives of annexing further land and displacing more Palestinians. So it is indeed a bad sign that these gates are now open for further right-wing and extremely actually religious and fanatic persons and ideas to be represented in the United States. This has to be opposed.
Right, that was Mr. Munir Nasiba, an international law professor from the occupied Jerusalem, and also Mr. Samir Abahra, a military expert from Jenin. We thank you both, gentlemen, for your insights, and I guess that brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Many thanks for joining us, for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.